Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome everyone into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology turned podcast. Everyone, welcome into the program today. We are excited to have you because we have a number of stories, and those stories are brought to you by the one, the only Mr. Ralph Bond. He is joining us. He is, of course, our science and technology trends correspondent. If you are new to our segments, you can guess what this is going to be about. But they're always fun and they're always uplifting. And hey, Ralph's segments are always, super nice. So every single Friday, he joins us for about half an hour, somewhere around there. However long the stories take. There was a day, not too long ago, that Ralph was with us for a full hour, and we still had more stories that you could go check out. But, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to go get more of Ralph, you have to go to his website, because every single week we do these shows, and of course he does a great job of archiving his programs with the show notes, and he puts those together. Those are relevant links, more information there you can find and everything that we discuss here on the program can be found either at computeramerica.com, or of course we'll have a link to his website as well if you want a more Ralph-centric kind of experience. So with all that being said, computeramerica.com, that's where you'll find everything for today's show, all shows, podcasts, social media, contests, giveaways, ladies and gentlemen, all that and more, computeramerica.com. So with that being said, let's go ahead and just bring Ralph in and kind of get the show started. It's always a lot of fun, and his role at Computer America has evolved over time, but he is now again our science and technology trends correspondent, where he brings you everything from science, tech, construction, medical, you name it. Hey, he dabbles. So everyone, welcome back into the program. Ralph, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I'm a conduit of all kinds of interesting news, and that's a truth in lending statement right up front, Ben. I don't create this content. I'm a conduit. I find it, distill it, crunch it down, and present it in a hopefully very friendly and happy way. And happy is the word, because that's what we do on every Friday. We give people uplifting and positive science and technology trend news.
Absolutely. And, that's other than a very, very select few organizations, like I would say MIT does this pretty good. Very few organizations can do both research and kind of the marketing side of being able to get their message out there of what they're doing. So I'm sure, and I've had a lot of, follow-ups and messages from, really the places that we talk about saying, thanks, we were excited to see you see our research or whatever we did on your program. So Ralph, don't sell yourself short. What you do is very, very helpful getting the word out about some of the stories that to your point might not otherwise get mainstream attention. So again, for anyone out there new, Ralph, why don't we go ahead and tell the nice folks what our kind of what we do on our segment.
Well, yeah, you set it up really well in terms of what I do in general. So I'll just kind of make it short here and just say what I do is I look for news that gives a glimpse into where we're headed in robotics, medical technology, sustainable energy technology, transportation advances, space research, physics, you name it, all across the board. And today's stories are really a good example of that eclectic, fun mix that we come up with. And what I do, and along with your help, Ben, is present the essential points of each of these stories in a very digestible form. And that's where the show notes come in. And Ben mentioned that in passing, I believe, earlier. Come out to computeramerica.com. Get the show notes for today's show, because it'll have pictures, links, and so forth if you want to dive deeper. And I guarantee we're going to skim a stone across the water of these stories, just giving you the high points. If you want to dive deeper into each story, you can with those links. And we put it in a digestible form, and we hope that this is going to be, if nothing else, leave you with feeling better about the future that we have to look forward to in science and tech.
Absolutely. And I think that story number one really is going to highlight that, because and I think California is really a poster child of how important rainfall is, and it's all going to make sense here in a second, folks. But California, I've been amazed this year. I'm sure Californians more so, that they went through a decade-long drought or something like that. It was years
terrible.
and years and years of droughts.
Yeah.
They were getting years without rainfall, without snow. Their reservoirs were drying up. Rivers were turning into creeks. It was amazing. And now, in the course of a year, like they're still crossing their fingers, hoping that they kind of get more rainfall. But Ralph, I don't know if you've seen some of the before and after pictures, but mountains are covered in snow again. They have reservoirs that are back to 10 years ago levels. They have rivers that are flowing again. It's really amazing what the climate change that we all kind of hear about in like a macro sense. Rainfall is very important. So story number one kind of gives you a little bit more hope.
Well, yeah, and this story also is so applicable to the entire Southwest. And what happened recently in California that you're alluding to is wonderful. It's a blessing, but is it a blip, a fluke? You can't count on it. So this is part of the story of we've got to get more water in our systems, especially in parts of our country and around the world where drought is a terrible problem. So here we go. Big lead up to the first story. Scientists explore new cloud seeding techniques to fight global drought. And this comes from, I first found it in a news story, but then I actually went to the source, the U.S. Department of Agricultural website, which is really quite good, by the way.
Yeah.
So severe droughts, no surprise, around the world are prompting the exploration of new and advanced cloud seeding methods. And before we talk about one of these new methods, here's a quick refresh on the established cloud seeding techniques. And clouds are formed when water droplets condense in the sky. Okay. And certain particles, such as silver iodide and salt particles, tend to attract water or ice and can potentially accelerate the process of generating rain. Silver iodide and salt particles have been used in cloud seeding to stimulate rain since the 1940s. So very well established technique. More recently, planes equipped with flares attached to their wings burning silver iodide have been flying through clouds to further stimulate rain, with some success generating 10 to 15% additional rainfall. And by the way, if you have the show notes, if you're watching us on your computer screen or what have you, there's a photograph showing the two USDA folks involved with this. And then there's a close-up of the wing and showing these nozzles, these special nozzles we'll talk about dispensing that the material we're going to talk about here in just a moment. So that's kind of fun to take a look at that. So one new and exciting alternative involves using charged water molecules. And this past summer, as part of a multi-year U.S. Department of Agriculture project, a team of researchers tested the use of charged water molecules. And here's what they did. Thunderclouds contain positive and negatively charged water molecules. And I'm simplifying this, folks. You get into the article, you can learn much more. Water molecules with opposite charges are attracted to each other and will combine to form drops large enough to fall as rain. So, big question was, what if you could accelerate this process by injecting a large dose of charged water molecules? So to boost this natural rain-making process, and I stress natural, what we're talking about is accelerating something that's natural instead of inducing or introducing materials and particles that traditional seeding does. So to boost this natural rain-making process, the USDA team equipped a plane with water tanks and special electrostatic nozzles on its wings. That was the reference to the photo earlier, and conducted test flights in the West Texas atmosphere. So at the right moment, the plane released a spray of positively charged water molecules into a cloud, causing the positive and negative water molecules to collide, bind together, and produce more rain. As they collide together, they create drops that are heavy enough to fall. So initial results look really good, as the USDA reports a 25 to 30% increase in rain production as compared to the established and traditional cloud seeding techniques. So there's some real encouragement for going down the road in the future. It's great.
That's very impressive. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying things like rain dancing didn't work or whatever, but I will say, Ralph, that Like when you talk about sci-fi stuff that's actually happening,
Yeah.
I feel like changing the weather is, you see it in like, sci-fi, like mutant movies, like X-Men movies and stuff like that, and being able to change the weather, but to actually be able to do it is really incredible. And one thing I was kind of curious about, because obviously the moisture has to come from somewhere, and there's natural water vapor in the air, but I was kind of wondering, is there more water vapor in the atmosphere, compared to 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago? And I found this little chart really kind of highlights to me, Ralph, the need for something like this, because this is between, if anyone out there, when you can see the video footage, 1980 to 2010, and this is the between land, marine, and then the average between the two. Humidity in the atmosphere, Ralph, and that's a pretty clear line that it's increasing.
Boy, it
we
sure
have
is.
more water vapor in the atmosphere. So, cloud seeding seems like it's going to be very important in the future because we have more water vapor in the air. So, hey, why not be able to tap into that?
Yeah, and you raise a good point. The analogy I'm going to make here is sort of like the stunning realization that there's oxygen and moisture in the regolith on the moon. Well, where am I going with that? Wacky comment. There's a lot of experimentation going on in desert areas of our country and elsewhere, where they're extracting water molecules overnight out of the air, that even in an arid desert where you think, oh my gosh, there's got to be nothing in the air that's moisture at all. No, there is. And that's what's so weird. So it kind of made me think of that when I looked at your chart here. But to think that our atmosphere is gaining humidity like that, well, maybe we can turn that humidity into more rain with this kind of technology that we just talked about. So that's that's very cool.
Yeah. And there's the kind of stuff that we talk about, Ralph, I will say that I'm noticing. I'm not saying that the wider population doesn't care about this kind of thing. I'm just saying that sometimes, Ralph, I hear stories that, we have talked about on the program, and then it takes about 6 to 8 months for, the conversation to kind of trickle down to everyone else. I remember there was one, I think this week I was reading Reddit or something like that, and they were talking about the possibility of putting sunlight blocking bubbles into space between the Earth and whatever to, really consider how we're going to geoengineer our planet to better, kind of suit our needs. And by the way, Ralph, that one, everyone was super against it. They were like, oh, this is awful, blah, blah, blah. But, that was actually a very uplifting story. The fact that we could do something that, is reversible and would have a very moderate but severe impact, kind of to our problems. All I'm saying is, these stories eventually make it to, a lot more people. And I'm glad to have this, these stories here with us. So, okay. All that being said, cloud seeding, very, very good. And I like the fact that they were able to change the material to be a bit more, environmentally friendly as well. So story number one. Story number two kind of hits personal. My mother-in-law recently had to go through all this. I'm sure a lot of people, breast cancer is very, very, very common, unfortunately, and getting more common. So story number two might give a bit more relief, because we were kind of at the stage, Ralph, with our family, that we were kind of waiting for, they took scans, they took they took tissue samples, and they were running tests on it and that kind of thing, and really determining it's not, even though they might find like a little bit of cancer, it's like, do you need radiation therapy, which is very extreme? Do you need this? Do you need that? Like, coming up with a treatment plan, very difficult, very convoluted, and, hey, very, very important. So story number two, I'm sure for a lot of people who go through this, might bring some relief.
Yeah, no, this is true. And talk about personal. My mother passed away at age 61. Wow. At the age I'm at now makes me realize how young that is in some respects, from complications of breast cancer. So we both share a very personal interest in this story. So here we go, folks. Here's the headline. New artificial intelligence tool helps predict if chemotherapy will benefit a breast cancer patient. This comes from Cosmos magazine. And really, boy, I just jumped on this, possibly because of my personal family history with this business here. And this is such an interesting story. You're going to find out there's two wonderful things coming out of the University of Waterloo in Ontario, Canada. And they've developed a new artificial intelligence software tool to help doctors better predict if patients with breast cancer, would or would not benefit from chemotherapy. To your point, Ben, of course, we all know chemotherapy and these treatments are very taxing on the human body.
Mm-hmm.
And so some patients could benefit from it and some patients it wouldn't help. And so wouldn't it be great to better be able to predict, hey, person X, this is not for you, or person X, you need it. So anyway, the remarkable results now being achieved with this new AI tool were made possible by training the software to analyze breast cancer images created using the latest cutting-edge imaging technology called CDI, which stands for Correlated Diffusion Imaging. So
never heard about that one.
No, this is new, Ben. So this is very, very cool. We've had MRI for many, many years, of course, and that's great. So here's a little more about this CDI. Again, really, really remarkable new stuff. Correlated diffusion imaging. Okay, more about this. So this turns out also to be not only the AI tool, but this CDI itself. So researchers at the University of Waterloo in Canada have developed a new form of magnetic resonance imaging, which we commonly refer to by the acronym MRI, that makes cancerous tissue glow in medical images and could aid in more accurately detecting and tracking the progression of cancer. And its full name it's known as synthetic, and I'm not quite sure why synthetic, but nonetheless, synthetic correlated diffusion imaging, again, just CDI. The new technology, and I love this, this is so interesting. The new technology highlights the differences in the way water molecules move in cancerous tissue compared to healthy tissue, doing so by capturing, synthesizing, and mixing MRI signals at different gradient pulse strengths and timings. So it's based on MRI, okay, but it's a different way of using MRI, and this whole bit about the water molecules. I just thought that was so interesting. Think about somebody at some point thinking, hey, if we could track how water molecules behave in cancerous tissue using MRI technology and synthesize it into something brand new we're going to call CDI. Wow.
Yeah, and I'm sure the person sitting across from the breakfast table is like, dude, come on, let me have coffee. There's a lot of process there. But no, I'm very, I guess it makes sense, Ralph, because, they can kind of say that this is what average skin tissue, muscle tissue, fat tissue, like this is, you kind of know that this is how water moves through those tissues because they're normal. And then I guess anything abnormal, you can pretty easily spot that difference. That is very... Yeah.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, very cool.
I know. Yeah, because otherwise you have MRI images, which are fabulous, but you're kind of like looking at an X-ray, if you want to call it that. And, having to go, I see a little spot there. And based on my experience as a physician and a diagnostician, I think it's this. But this adds a dimension to that analysis.
The difference between a series of pictures and almost like a movie to kind of see, where the water moves. That's very cool.
Yeah. Very cool. So going on with the story then, with the CDI established now, the machine learning process. This is also part of the fascinating part of this story. So the machine learning process used to train the new AI tool involved analyzing a large set of actual breast cancer patient CDI generated images, along with information about the treatment outcomes for each image. So let that sink in for a second. So you're analyzing real breast cancer patient CDI generated images, and you're analyzing them in terms of, what was the treatment outcome for each of these patients for each of these images. So it gives a real world basis. So the AI is learning, this patient had a successful outcome. Their CDI image looked like this. This patient had an unsuccessful outcome. Their CDI image looked like this. And you learn from this to distinguish who would or would not benefit perhaps from chemotherapy treatment. So the end result of this intensive machine learning process is an AI tool that can predict with remarkable accuracy whether preoperative chemotherapy would or would not be beneficial based on each patient's breast images. In fact, the researchers found that the combination of their new AI software tool working with advanced CDI breast cancer images offered a prediction accuracy of 87.75%, higher than the results obtained using current MRI technology. Now, truth in lending, if you read the article, it's not tremendously higher, but it's still another incremental notch in the accuracy and the ability for physicians and analysts to look at these images and make predictions about treatment therapy. So it's just talk about a positive story, Ben. This is the kind of stuff you and I love to do every Friday.
And it doesn't really have to be much more accurate, because I mean, when they do this kind of thing, Ralph, they're not just taking 100 or 1,000 kind of breast cancer patients and being like, congratulations, you're doing experimental stuff and it probably won't work, but we got to start somewhere. That's not really how it kind of works. Like, they're still getting the care that they would otherwise get. They're still getting the doctor visits. They're still getting the MRI imaging. They're still getting all that, Ralph. It's just after the fact, they kind of go, you went through chemotherapy. Your cancer was not responsive to this, so we're going to put you down in the column for, the AI predicted that it wouldn't, and it didn't. So that's accurate for the AI. That even though you said it's not much more accurate than just strictly using MRI technology, it's another layer that the doctors can kind of look at it and go, the AI says no, our gut feeling is no as well, so maybe we're going to go with this.
Exactly.
Very cool. And again, just the idea that potentially saving someone who wouldn't have, who probably shouldn't go through chemotherapy, doesn't have to go through chemotherapy because of all these factors blending together. I mean, I'm sure, obviously you got to look for a new treatment, but hey, you don't have to go through the whole chemotherapy process, which is great. Very, very uplifting.
One final salute to the University of Waterloo in Ontario, Canada. Good for them. We don't have many stories. Not that the Canadians aren't doing some great work, but, let's be honest, we just haven't had that many stories coming out of Canada. So good for you guys up there. I love it. That's great.
Oh, yeah, no. Canada definitely does a lot. We have a lot of Canadian startups here on the program. Recently we have like a drone company out of there. They're, cool. Obviously their population research bucks are much smaller than America, but they do some really great work. So definitely keep an eye on north of the border. So with that being said, story number 2, story number 3. And I was talking to Ralph before the show about fishing and wildlife, and nature's full of craziness, Ralph. But I think when humans get involved, not saying like, toxic sewage and fish have like 3 heads and stuff like that. When humans get involved, it's a very sensitive topic, I guess, because, hundreds, if not thousands of years, Ralph, we've learned that introducing invasive species to solve a problem for us might not always have the best solution. And, kind of taking nature into our own hands, it's a very interconnected web. But story number 3, we're trying it again. This one looks a bit more promising, and it's not as radical, I guess, as some of the other approaches that we've seen, but it does mix DNA.
And before we went on air, you and I were joking. Story number 3, you could call it Franken-Gator, and we'll explain that here. Headline: Scientists are making catfish hybrids with alligator DNA. Got this from sciencealert.com. So right off the top, you might think, well, it sounds weird, but, so what about catfish? Well, I didn't know this. This just blew my mind. I'm never going to look at a fish stick the same way again. Catfish make up more than 50% of U.S. demand for fish, for food. More than 50%. All of a sudden, catfish become, a serious food supply issue, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's the justification. I love that. I had no idea, none at all. But catfish farmers have a real problem. About 45% of farm-raised baby catfish living, understandably, in crowded, tank-like conditions die. They die due to infectious diseases. So to create more disease-resistant catfish, geneticists at Auburn University have been experimenting with genetically modifying catfish with a specific gene found in the intestines of alligators. Wow. The gene in question, and by the way, if you use the link, go to the article, you can learn the exact long name for this gene and so forth. So I've simplified it here, right? This gene in question is an antimicrobial peptide responsible for helping an alligator fight multiple diseases. So using the famous gene editing technology called CRISPR, we all know about that. The gene was added to the DNA of the test catfish, and this yielded up to a 5-fold higher survival rate for farm-raised baby catfish. So again, if catfish represent more than 50% of U.S. consumption of fish, getting a 5-fold higher survival rate for farm-raised catfish it's significant.
Yeah.
So the researchers at Auburn University hope that the alligator and catfish gene editing can be used in tandem with other catfish breeding techniques to help farmers improve their catfish yields. So it's what I love about these kind of stories. It's like there's a couple of fire off. Who knew? I had no idea catfish that much food. I always thought of catfish as kind of a southern thing, a southern part of our country.
Yeah, fried catfish every once in a while.
Yeah, and it's great. But I didn't realize if it's more than 50% of our food supply for fish in this country, it's got to be. I was joking about the fish sticks, but I'm going to start reading the back of the package. Not that I have any problem with it, but
looking through this article actually from MIT, I guess MIT had some mix in here as well. But they said that on a per pound basis, 60 to 70% of aquaculture is catfish by weight. So huge improvement, and of course being able to kind of make the fish live longer. That's very important. You don't want all that dead fish. You want living fish. Ralph, this is the part where, and I'm going to get on a little soapbox here. There's a pretty big push in this country for non-GMO foods. This catfish mixed with alligator DNA, thanks to CRISPR, is like the definition of a GMO food.
Right.
I am so for GMOs. I can't explain it. Whenever I see like non-GMO, like I actually kind of go away from it because, making heartier, more nutritious, better, more disease resistant, making our food supply, require less water, require less nutrients, less damaging for the soil, whatever it may be, Ralph. There's so many positives that we've seen from editing our food supply that I love stories like this because it really goes to show that human ingenuity is trying to tackle these problems. So I always see like a non-GMO thing as like a pushback against that. It's like, no, we need to go back to the way things were. I'm like, the way things weren't always working out very well for us. So that's my little soapbox.
As you were speaking, I was thinking you make a really good point. Because if you have some heartache about CRISPR being used to create GMO products and so forth, time out. Our ancestors, humanity's ancestors, for thousands, possibly millions of years, whatever, have been doing that. They weren't using CRISPR, of course, but they were crossbreeding animals, crossbreeding plants to get a hardier plant, better animal, this and that, such and so. Look at dog breeding. I mean, all across the board. But that's genetic editing.
Oh, yeah.
So think about it. All we're doing is just using science to do what our ancestors had to do over thousands of years, right? They're just accelerating the process.
Much more targeted, much more accurate. Yeah, 5,000 years ago, it was like, hey, Ralph had a really great harvest of grain this year. We should ask Ralph if we can borrow some of his seeds so that we can use it on ours. Same thing.
Exactamente. And grafting fruit trees and stuff, and all that kind of stuff. All of that is genetics.
Yep. And this is but this one again was the Frankenfish, and it was the Franken-Gator. It was very, very cool. So and ladies and gentlemen, for those who can't see the image, the video portion of this, it did not change the look of the fish in any way, shape, or form. They look exactly the same.
Disease resistance.
This is on like a immune system level, not a. They don't look half gator, half fish. So
yes,
don't worry about it. Yes. So just want to make that perfectly clear. Story number 3, story number 4. And really, I can imagine, people catfish giant teeth, but no. Story number 4. This one is very promising because, hey, again, worrying about, the future of processes and they have to change and, to make it easier for us to kind of live with these things. We like steel. We like to be able to make things and manufacture things, and and Ralph, let's face it, pretty much everything that we use, especially everything from appliances to cars to building to, so on and so forth, it all starts somewhere. And to be able to cut down, well, I'll let you go ahead and get story number 4, but this is helpful for pretty much every industry of manufacturing out there.
Yeah. So the headline here from Popular Science is new factory retrofit could reduce a steel's plant carbon emissions by 90%. And Ben, we've talked over the last couple of years or so. Periodically, we'll come up with a story about somebody's got an idea to cut down emissions in steel making plants and so forth. So this is not the first time ever somebody's come up with a way to reduce carbon emissions from a steel plant, but it's I'll call it the latest kind of thing that seems to be bubbling up as a new twist to a story that's been ongoing. So researchers at the University of Birmingham in England have laid out a new closed loop retrofit, well, you'll understand that in a moment, for industrial iron and steel furnaces, that could reduce their overall greenhouse gas emissions by nearly 90%. Now, if successfully implemented or deployed, if you will, the novel approach could be a game changer for some of the world's most pesky polluters. And today, the iron and steel industries compose nearly 10% of all global greenhouse gas emissions. That's significant, right? The issues stem from traditional, and why are they so pesky polluters? Here's the deal. The issues stem from traditional blast furnace operations, which require distilling coal and coke. Distilling coal in coke ovens, which eventually produce carbon monoxide. Once the coke interacts with iron ore in the furnace, its resultant so-called top gas, TOP gas, composed mainly of carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen, is then burned to raise its air blast temperature as high as 1,350 degrees Celsius, which is 2,462 degrees Fahrenheit. Wow, hot. With leftover pollutants released into the outside air. Now, currently, the vast majority of plans for decarbonizing this sector, the steel and plant making area, require phasing out existing steel and iron furnaces. It basically says, hey, if we're going to decarbonize, we got to just throw out what we've got, kind of start all over again, and replace them with renewable energy-powered electric arc facilities. Works, nothing wrong, it works, it's a total, but it means throwing away what you have. And that could be very expensive. So unfortunately, electric arc facilities can cost billions of dollars to construct. They're talking about a deployment on a global level, making them an unlikely candidate for large-scale adoption, in the time frame necessary to stave off the worst of our climate crisis. So, as highlighted in their recent paper, published in the Journal of Cleaner Production, however, the team at the University of Birmingham was able to capture carbon dioxide from traditional furnaces, top gas, and reduce it to carbon monoxide and oxygen using perovskite. I hope I'm saying that right. I practiced it a couple times. Material made of crystalline mineral latticework. So perovskite. And that's spelled Perovskite. Okay, so perovskite is a yellow, brown, or black mineral consisting largely of calcium titanate. All right, little mineralogy details for you here. The percosite requires much lower temperatures to facilitate the chemical reactions, which can be generated by either renewable energy sources or even heat exchangers simply connected to the furnaces. Both the carbon monoxide and the oxygen are then fed back into the furnace. There's the loop we talked about before, where needed in the steel making process to form a nearly perfect closed loop system. According to the researchers, if their method is implemented in the United Kingdom, in the UK's 2 remaining blast furnace plants, it could save over $1.5 billion US within 5 years while reducing the country's overall emissions by nearly 3%. Wow. And then the article ends by talking about extrapolate that to a global steel and iron industries deployment. And it's easy to imagine how this could provide a huge boost towards our transition towards greener infrastructure. So, the latest step in this idea of how can we make steel plants more green and friendly.
It's green, it's friendly, but it also, kind of does the other part where it saves money, saves 1.5 billion over 5 years. And also, and that was the part that I really liked about the story, Ralph, was UK, and yes, this was the University of Birmingham. So obviously this is dealing with the UK, but just 2 blast furnaces, the 2 remaining ones, but 2 blast furnaces cut the entire country. So agriculture, transportation, whatever it may be, 3% across the board just from these 2.
Yeah. And again, I stress again, and we mentioned this numerous times, it's the key point here. They're not saying to the steel industry, sorry, you got to throw away all those existing plants you've got. Sorry, you've got to go an entirely different direction. Wipe the slate clean, build up from the ground. No, take what you've got, guys. Use this technique, and you can keep the basic infrastructure you have, but dramatically reduce the impact on the climate. So very cool.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot to love about the story because it's. I don't want to say any of this is easy, but it's economical and it is possible. And that's, sometimes not all stories hit those 2 marks, but hey, they do definitely give you hope for the future. So everyone, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here on the program. That has been Ralph. He is our science and tech trends correspondent, comes to you with 4 stories every single week, and they're always great. Ralph, this week was no exception. I want to thank you so much for coming back on. And ladies and gentlemen, computeramerica.com will have a link to Ralph's site and, of course, the video playlist. Ladies and gentlemen, until next week, have a great one. So long. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.